believed that they weren't worthy of a direct relationship with God. So they had to have that relationship come about via this idol, which is generally what idol worship, for the most part, is about. Okay? So they doubted their own ability to have a direct relationship with God. They needed to do it through a middleman, hence the calf, the idol, whatever. It's okay.
Yeah. If you were to stand with Maimonides and say, Ani Ma'aman, would you then be denying that the moon has a dark side?
No. No. For Maimonides, when he talks about the word Emunah, the 13 principles of faith, Ani Ma'amin,
right.
For Maimonides, he would translate the word trust, or he would translate the word belief. The 13 principles of belief is a better translation than the 13 principles of faith.
That's good.
In fact, that's how they're usually translated. Okay? It's interesting, the history of that word. The word emunah, so there's like two kinds of possible roots to it. You might think as the root of emunah as uman. Uman is an architect, or a person who is a creative artist. Or you might think of the word as omen, which is somebody who nurtures, all right, a nursling, a child who nurses from his father, or from his mother, rather. So if omen, a nursling, a child that nurses from its mother, if the root of the word emunah is a creative kind of a person, then the creative person works with an idea. He works from things that he has at his disposal. He has chalk, he has crayons, he has whatever it is he's going to use, or at least he's got an idea. From there, the word would then mean belief, because it's based on some sort of something. If we're talking about the root of the word emunah as oman, or nursling, then we're talking about faith. That this is grace, this is what gives the person that kind of will to have faith. In a sense, that in itself is grace. Okay? He's being nurtured from a source of transcendence beyond the realm of reason. All right? So for Maimonides, the root of the word emunah would, be uman, an architect, somebody who creates, and therefore it would wind up being trust. You trust on the basis of something.
So it doesn't imply the transcendence.
Right, it doesn't imply that kind of, it might be a transcending act ultimately, but it's based on something that makes sense. And there's a reason for it. Whereas the Kabbalist would say no. It has to do with nurturing from one's source in transcendence, which is, comes about because of worthiness or grace or who knows why, okay? And there you would have what's called emunah pshuta, simple faith, which as it came to be known. It's interesting that in the time of Maimonides, most people translated the word, as did Maimonides, faith. It was only after many, many years and experiences of galut, of exile, and troubles, and torture, that people came around as a whole to accept the Kabbalistic point of view. So today, if you said emunah to the average yeshiva student or something like that, you would mean emunah pshuta, you would mean simple blind faith. But that's not how it always was. Okay, that finishes the first part of this. Now, any questions, anything you want to go further, take a break? What do you want to do? Okay.
Is everybody comfortable temperature-wise here? It's a little warm. Okay, I'll turn it. Shall we barrel?
Excuse me?
Sounds like you've laid the groundwork for something. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first, and now we have the second part of this. But the question is, if you want to take a 10-minute break, come back and you go for the second part, or you want to sit for another hour. That's what you want to. Let's do it.
It's hard enough to turn.
I'll turn the heat down, but you bring the heat up.
Let me say, okay. Just as a couple of afterthoughts about this first part, talking about Maimonides and his principles of faith. There was once a Hasidic Rebbe who walks into a synagogue and he sees one of his followers who stayed on after the prayer service for a while because he prayed slower than the others. And he's up to this last part of the prayer where some people read the 13 principles of faith as were put forth by Maimonides. And so a principle of faith might be, Ani ma'amin b'yemuna shlema, I believe with perfect faith, B'vias HaMashiach, the coming of the Messiah, V'yaf al pi sheyismameya, and even though he might tarry, Im kol zeh chakalo b'chol yom sheyavo, even still, I anxiously await for him to come each and every day. So that's how these principles of faith are. They begin with the words, Ani ma'amin b'yemuna shlema, I believe with perfect faith. So the Rebbe notices that this student, after each one of these things that he says, he mutters to himself in an undertone, but I don't.
Oh, that's great.
So the Rebbe walks over to the student and says, what do you mean you don't? He says, Rabbi, if I really believed this stuff, I would be a totally different kind of human being. I mean, I'd be really on an exalted spiritual plane. Let's face it, I'm mouthing these, platitudes here, I'm mouthing this, but I don't really believe this. The Rebbe thinks about it for a while and he says, I got a suggestion for you. Instead of reading them and saying at the end, but I don't, why don't you start each one with the word halavai, if only.
That's nice. That's great.
I remember also when I first came into yeshiva, I was about 14 years old. My parents weren't particularly Orthodox Jews. And my friends and I would discuss faith. And we would talk about whether, this is just a good idea or it actually works. And I had a certain friend, his name was Ezekiel Peltzman, who I still to this day go to New York every year when I'm in this country and I have dinner with him in New York. And Ezekiel Peltzman and I decided at one point that going to school for 10 months a year was just too much. So we took a calendar and divided a month into 9 months, which means that every single month you have to play hooky a certain amount of days to make sure that you only go to school for 9 months and not 10 months. Right? And we did this. And one time in early June, we decided to go and visit Rockaway Playland. We lived in Brooklyn, and you have to go to Flatbush Avenue and take a certain bus called the Green Line, and it's going to get you to Rockaway Playland. And so we saved up some money. We had about $1 each. And cost maybe a nickel or something to go on the bus. And we got to Flatbush Avenue, and we didn't realize, but to get to Rockaway Playland on this Green Line, this is a privately owned bus company, it was like 35 cents each way. So that if you went to Rockaway Playland, you could just about go there and come back, and you wouldn't have any money to get into the Playland. You could go to Rockaway. But we said, what an opportunity to test our faith. So we went on the bus, and we had these little pocket Siddur prayer books with us, which had the Psalms in it. And we're saying the Psalms, that somehow, magically, you need at least 50 cents to get into Rockaway Playland. We don't have that. 50 cents each. And we're hoping and praying and not paying much attention to each other, really deep into this. And we get to Rockaway, and you have to walk on this boardwalk for about a mile or so to get to the Playland. And we're still steeped in thought and really in prayer. We want to see this happen. And after about 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes walking on the boardwalk, some woman who had 2 dogs, an older woman, she had 2 dogs, and the dogs had broken away from her. And she called up, she said, "Could you boys catch my dogs for me?" So we jumped off the boardwalk onto the beach, and we caught her dogs, and she gave us each $1. And there was a God in the world. And there was a God in the world. And it's really true, And so in a certain sense, faith creates a vessel into which blessing comes.
So another example of the Green Line leading to the
Right. That's right. Good point. All right. In dealing with legal issues of judgment, our starting point must be doubt. As in Avot, the Ethics of Our Fathers 1:8, Yehuda ben Tabai said, when the parties to a suit are standing before you, let them both be regarded by you as guilty, but when they have departed from your presence, regard them both as innocent, the verdict having been accepted by them both. So it's important to doubt each one's innocence in the beginning of, a judgment, and to then regard both parties as innocent after they have accepted the ruling.